January 24th, 1989, 6:16 a.m. Outside Florida State Prison, hundreds of people gather in the cold morning air. They hold signs that read, "Burn Bundy" and "Justice at Last." Some cheer, others set off fireworks. News crews from across America point their cameras at the prison walls. Inside those walls, in a small concrete cell, sits the man they're all waiting to see die, Theodore Robert Bundy. To the world, he's America's most hated serial killer, the monster who murdered at least 30 young women across 7 states, the predator who used his charm and good looks to lure victims to their deaths. But Ted Bundy wasn't always a killer. He was once an honor student, a law school graduate, a man who worked at a suicide hotline, saving lives instead of taking them. Women found him attractive, politicians trusted him, police officers shook his hand. So how did this clean-cut, intelligent young man become one of history's most brutal serial killers? And after years of lying, manipulating courts, and escaping from jail, why is he finally ready to die? In less than 1 hour, Ted Bundy will take his final walk. But first, you need to know the shocking truth about how America's most charming killer was finally caught. Before we begin, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to this channel. Your support means the world to us. Ted Bundy's life began with a lie that shaped everything that followed. On November 24th, 1946, Eleanor Louise Cowell gave birth to a baby boy in Burlington, Vermont. She was unmarried, and in 1946 that was a scandal, so the family created a story. They told everyone that Eleanor's parents, Samuel and Eleanor Cowell, were the baby's real parents. Little Theodore would grow up believing his mother was actually his older sister. For the first 3 years of his life, Ted lived with his grandparents in Philadelphia. But even as a toddler, something was wrong. His Aunt Julia would never forget the morning she woke up from a nap to find 3-year-old Ted standing beside her bed, smiling. He had placed kitchen knives all around her sleeping body, pointing them at her like a deadly circle. When Ted was 4, his mother moved them to Washington State. She married a man named Johnny Bundy, who adopted Ted and gave him his famous last name. Johnny tried to be a good father, but Ted always felt distant from him. He wasn't very bright and didn't make much money, Ted would later complain. As Ted grew older, the disturbing behavior continued. Neighbors in Tacoma remembered him as a mean-spirited kid who liked to hurt others. One neighbor, Sandy Holt, claimed Ted once hung a cat from a clothesline and set it on fire. She said he would take younger children into the woods, force them to strip naked, and terrorize them until they screamed. But Ted had another side. At school, he was smart and well-liked. Teachers saw him as polite and helpful. He got good grades and seemed like the perfect student. This ability to fool people would become his greatest weapon. By his teenage years, Ted was already breaking into homes and stealing. But he wasn't just a common thief. He was learning to study people, to understand what they wanted to hear. He discovered he could charm almost anyone. Ted also developed a disturbing habit. Late at night, he would walk through neighborhoods, looking for windows where he could watch women undressing. He collected detective magazines filled with pictures of dead and injured women. He was building fantasies that would one day become deadly reality. The boy who started life as a lie was becoming something much worse. He was becoming a predator. By 1974, Ted Bundy was 27 years old and living what looked like a normal life in Seattle. He was studying law at the University of Washington. He had a girlfriend named Elizabeth Klopfer who loved him. He even worked at a crisis hotline, talking people out of suicide. But behind this perfect mask, Ted was planning something terrible. On January 31st, 1974, 21-year-old Linda Ann Healy went to bed in her basement room near the University of Washington campus. She was a psychology student and radio announcer with long, dark hair parted down the middle. The next morning, her roommates found her bed empty. The sheets were covered in blood. But Linda was gone forever. Police had no idea they were looking at the work of a serial killer. They thought maybe Linda had run away or been kidnapped for ransom. They were wrong. Ted had found his type. Young, attractive college women with long brown hair parted in the middle. They all looked similar, and they all reminded him of someone from his past, his first serious girlfriend who had broken his heart years earlier. Over the next few months, more women vanished. Donna Gail Manson disappeared from Evergreen State College in March. Susan Rancourt vanished from Central Washington University in April. Roberta Parks went missing from Oregon State University in May. Brenda Ball disappeared after leaving a tavern in June. Ted's method was brilliant in its simplicity. He would wear a fake cast on his arm or leg or use crutches. Then he would approach young women and ask for help carrying books to his car or loading something heavy. He looked harmless, a clean-cut, well-dressed young man who clearly needed assistance. What woman wouldn't help? But once they got to his car, Ted would attack. He kept a crowbar hidden inside, which he used to knock his victims unconscious. Then he would drive them to remote locations where he could do whatever he wanted. The breakthrough came on July 14, 1974, at Lake Sammamish State Park near Seattle. It was a beautiful Sunday, and thousands of people were enjoying the sunshine. That day, 2 women disappeared. Janice Ott and Denise Naslund. But this time, witnesses saw everything. Multiple people watched a handsome young man with his arm in a sling approach women near the beach. He introduced himself as Ted and asked for help loading a sailboat onto his car. Several women said no and walked away. Janice Ott said yes. Hours later, the same man approached Denise Naslund and her friends. Again, he asked for help. Again, he said his name was Ted. Denise agreed to help and never returned. Police now had descriptions, composite sketches, and even a name. But they couldn't believe their suspect could be a serial killer. He was too normal, too charming, too educated. How could someone like that be a monster? By 1975, Ted Bundy had moved to Utah to attend law school, but he couldn't stop killing. Women continued to disappear. Melissa Smith, Laura Aim, Deborah Kent. The bodies that were found showed signs of terrible violence. On August 16, 1975, Bundy's luck finally ran out. Utah Highway Patrol Sergeant Bob Hayward was driving through a quiet neighborhood in Salt Lake City when he spotted a tan Volkswagen Beetle driving slowly with its headlights off. When Hayward tried to pull the car over, the driver sped away. After a brief chase, Hayward arrested the driver. Theodore Robert Bundy. Inside Ted's car, police found what they called a murder kit. There were handcuffs, rope, an ice pick, a ski mask, and a crowbar. Ted claimed these were just tools for work, but investigators knew better. Hair evidence found in Ted's car matched several victims. Witnesses identified him in lineups. In 1976, he was convicted of kidnapping Carol DeRanche, a young woman who had escaped from his car. Ted was sentenced to prison, but he wasn't done fighting. On June 7, 1977, Ted was taken to the Pitkin County Courthouse in Aspen, Colorado for a hearing. During a break, his guards removed his handcuffs and leg irons. Ted asked to visit the law library on the 2nd floor. When no one was watching, he opened a window and jumped. Ted was free. For 6 days, he hid in the Colorado mountains, stealing food and clothes. But the wilderness was too harsh. Cold and hungry, he was recaptured while trying to steal a car. 6 months later, Ted escaped again. This time, he had spent weeks sawing through the ceiling of his jail cell with a hacksaw blade. On December 30, 1977, he squeezed through the hole and crawled to freedom. Ted didn't waste his freedom. He stole a car and drove straight to Florida. On January 15, 1978, he broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University in Tallahassee. In just 15 minutes, Ted unleashed pure evil. He killed 21-year-old Margaret Bowman by strangling her and fracturing her skull. He killed 20-year-old Lisa Levy the same way, but also sexually assaulted her and bit her buttocks, so hard he left permanent teeth marks. Two other sorority sisters, Karen Chandler and Kathy Kleiner, were brutally beaten but survived. 3 weeks later, Ted committed his final murder. On February 9, 1978, he kidnapped 12-year-old Kimberly Diane Leach from her middle school in Lake City, Florida. Her body was found 8 weeks later in a state park. She had been sexually assaulted and murdered. On February 15, 1978, Pensacola police officer David Lee pulled over a stolen orange Volkswagen Beetle. The driver gave a fake name, but fingerprints revealed the truth. Ted Bundy's killing spree was finally over. Ted Bundy's trials turned into the greatest show on earth. For the first time in American history, murder trials were broadcast live on television. Millions of people watched from their living rooms as the handsome killer defended himself in court. Ted fired his lawyers and chose to represent himself. He believed he was smarter than everyone else in the courtroom. He wore nice suits, smiled at the cameras, and acted like a movie star. Women sent him love letters. Some even showed up to court just to see him, but Ted's charm couldn't hide the evidence against him. In the Chi Omega trial, prosecutors had a smoking gun. Bite marks. Lisa Levy's body showed clear teeth impressions on her buttocks. Forensic experts compared the bite marks to Ted's teeth. The match was perfect. No other person in the world could have made those marks. There was more evidence. Fibers from the Chi Omega house were found in Ted's stolen car. A pantyhose mask found in his car contained hairs that matched Chi Omega victim Karen Chandler. Witnesses placed Ted near the sorority house on the night of the murders. Ted's own behavior in court hurt him too. He was arrogant and cocky. He cross-examined witnesses like he was putting on a show. The jury saw through his act. On July 24, 1979, Ted was found guilty of murdering Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy. Judge Edward Cowart sentenced him to death, but then said something surprising. "You're a bright young man. You'd have made a good lawyer, but you went another way, partner." During his second trial for killing Kimberly Leach, something shocking happened. Ted's former girlfriend, Carol Ann Boone, was testifying as a character witness. In the middle of her testimony, Ted asked her to marry him. She said yes. Under Florida law, this made them legally married right there in the courtroom. Ted received his second death sentence for killing Kimberly. Later, he got a third death sentence for the Chi Omega attacks. Carol Ann even had Ted's baby while he was on death row. She believed in his innocence and visited him regularly, but as the years passed and Ted finally started confessing to his crimes, Carol Ann felt betrayed. She stopped visiting and eventually divorced him. Ted was alone, facing 3 death sentences with nowhere left to run. For over a decade on death row, Ted Bundy stuck to the same story. He was innocent. He claimed he was framed. He said the evidence was planted. He insisted he was just a victim of bad luck and police mistakes. But as his execution date got closer, Ted finally realized his lies wouldn't save him anymore. In 1984, FBI agent Bill Hagmaier began visiting Ted in prison. Unlike other investigators, Hagmaier didn't yell or threaten. He just listened. Slowly, Ted began to trust him. And slowly, the truth started coming out. The real truth was much worse than anyone had imagined. Ted didn't just kill 30 women. He hinted that the number was much higher, maybe 100 or more. He had been killing since he was a teenager, long before police suspected. "I've killed so many women I have a hard time keeping them straight," he told Hagmaier. But the murders were just the beginning of Ted's evil. He described keeping victims' severed heads in his apartment as trophies. He would wash their hair and put makeup on their faces. He talked to these heads like they were still alive. Ted also returned to dump sites where he had left bodies. Sometimes weeks or months later he would go back to have sex with the decomposing corpses. "I would lick them and talk to them and make love to them," he said without any emotion. When Hagmaier asked why he killed, Ted's answer was chilling. The ultimate possession was the taking of life, and then the physical possession of the remains. Ted described murder as giving him deep, mystical satisfaction. He said killing was like an addiction. The more he did it, the more he needed it. As his execution date approached, Ted tried one last desperate trick. He called it his bones for time scheme. He offered to tell police where more bodies were buried, but only if they delayed his execution. He wanted to trade dead women's locations for more time to live. But authorities had heard enough of Ted's games. They knew he was just trying to manipulate the system one more time. Governor Bob Martinez made it clear, we are not going to have the system manipulated. Ted's confessions revealed the mind of a true monster. He felt no guilt, no remorse, no sadness for his victims. Even facing death, he only cared about himself. The charming law student was gone. All that remained was the killer he had always been inside. January 23, 1989. 6:00 in the morning. Ted Bundy wakes up in his death row cell for the last time. Outside, crowds are already gathering. Inside, the man who once escaped from 2 different jails now faces something he cannot escape. Time. Ted has spent 11 years on death row, filing appeal after appeal. He's convinced judges to delay his execution multiple times. But now, all his legal tricks have failed. In less than 26 hours, he will be dead. At 9:00 a.m., Ted's mother, Louise Bundy, arrives for her final visit. She's the only family member who still believes in his innocence. Even after all his confessions to the FBI, she refuses to accept that her son is a killer. Louise raised Ted believing he was her brother, not her son. She's stood by him through every trial, every appeal, every news story. Now, at 65 years old, she sits across from him in the prison visiting room, crying. "I love you, Teddy," she tells him. "I've always loved you." Ted tries to comfort her, but his hands are shaking. Louise will not attend the execution tomorrow. She cannot bear to watch her son die. At 2:00 p.m., Methodist minister Fred Lawrence visits Ted's cell. Ted claims he wants to make peace with God before he dies. But even now, investigators wonder if this is just another manipulation. Is Ted truly sorry, or is he just afraid? That evening, Ted gives his final interview to Dr. James Dobson, a Christian psychologist. The interview will air on television after his death. In it, Ted blames pornography for turning him into a killer. Those of us who have been so influenced by violence in the media, particularly pornographic violence, are not some kind of inherent monsters, Ted says. We are your sons and husbands. But FBI agent Bill Hagmaier knows this is a lie. Ted's violence started long before he ever saw pornography. Even in his final hours, Ted is trying to control his story. At 5:00 p.m., prison guards bring Ted his last meal. Medium rare steak, eggs over easy, hash browns, toast with butter and jelly, milk and coffee. It's the standard last meal given to all condemned prisoners in Florida. But Ted, who once had an insatiable appetite for violence, cannot eat. He stares at the food on his tray, his hands trembling. He takes a few sips of coffee, then pushes the tray away. For the first time in his life, Ted Bundy looks truly afraid. The mask he's worn for decades is finally slipping away. January 24th, 1989. 7:00 a.m. Prison Superintendent Tom Barton and his team arrive at Ted Bundy's cell. Ted is awake, sitting on his narrow bed. He's wearing a blue shirt and dark pants, his execution outfit. "It's time, Ted," Barton says quietly. Ted stands up slowly. His legs are shaking, but he tries to walk with dignity. The walk from death row to the execution chamber takes exactly 2 minutes. Ted has made this walk in his nightmares for 11 years. Now it's real. The execution chamber is small and bright. In the center sits Old Sparky, Florida's electric chair. This same chair has killed 225 other condemned prisoners, including serial killer Gerald Stano just 2 years earlier. 42 witnesses watch from behind glass windows. They include journalists, prison officials, and family members of Ted's victims. His own family is not here. His mother, Louise, couldn't bear to watch. His ex-wife, Carol Ann Boone, wants nothing to do with him anymore. Prison guards strap Ted into the wooden chair. Leather straps hold down his arms, legs, and chest. A metal cap with electrodes is placed on his shaved head. A black hood covers his face. Superintendent Barton asks Ted if he has any final words. Ted's voice is quiet but clear. "Jim and Fred, I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends." He's talking to FBI agent Bill Hagmeyer and Minister Fred Lawrence, the only two men who showed him any kindness in his final days. At exactly 7:16 a.m., executioner Samuel Jones pulls the switch. 2,000 volts of electricity surge through Ted's body. His hands clench into fists. His body jerks against the straps. Then he goes still. Outside the prison, hundreds of people erupt in celebration. They set off fireworks, cheer, and chant, "Burn, Bundy, burn!" College students wave signs reading, "Tuesday is Friday." After 15 years of terror, manipulation, and legal games, Theodore Robert Bundy is finally dead. His body is cremated later that day. His ashes are scattered in Washington's Cascade Mountains, the same wilderness where he dumped so many of his victims. Justice, at last, is served. Ted Bundy's reign of terror was over, but his victims will never be forgotten. At least 30 young women lost their lives to his evil. Families were destroyed. Communities lived in fear. Ted Bundy died believing he was special, that he was smarter than everyone else. In the end, he was just another killer who got caught. If this story shocked you, make sure to like this video and share it with others who need to hear the truth about Ted Bundy. Subscribe for more true crime stories that reveal the dark side of human nature.